Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight number 32 with service to Sacramento, California and the Sacred Heart Hospital. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember, wait a minute, it appears that we have a passenger that is not feeling well. Do we have a doctor on board? I need 20 cc's of ginger ale stat.
Welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How you boys doing today?
Hey, I am doing so good. This is one of my favorite shows of all time.
I'm so excited for this week. This is going to be blast.
Well, let me just take a quick temperature on what we're doing this week. We're doing Scrubs this week.
Yeah.
The early 2000s classic. It is wild to think this show came out a little bit less than 22 years ago, which makes me
And I just have to say,
icky.
if you have not checked us out on YouTube, I encourage you to just go ahead and listen to this on our YouTube feed because Geoff committed this week. Jeff's wearing scrubs. Jeff's doing like stethoscope prop
Holy
humor
shit.
already.
Yeah, like, just checking, the pulse of this podcast is pretty strong. So I'm going to say...
Hey, but the audience is dead.
Well...
No respect.
For those of you who might be joining us on YouTube for the first time or found us on whatever podcasting service you listen to, Max, do you mind telling the folks what this podcast is all about?
Absolutely. So here at TV Pilot's License, we break down the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous pilot episodes. We get some background on their creators and showrunners, figure out how these shows came to be. We discuss if we think that they could be made today, and if they're successful pilots and making us want to watch more. Like Geoff said, we've got a whole bevy of episodes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from, so go back and find a show you may love and want to revisit. Find a show you may want to just know more about, and if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
Well, Jeff, I took this week off and outsourced this work to my brother. And what Peter Inman wants to know is who's your favorite bromance in TV history? He's asking 3 Vanilla Bears what their favorite.
Oh my gosh, That's just such a wild question to me because there's so many to choose from. And Rich, since you got a little bit of extra time with this question,
Sure did.
What is your favorite bromance?
Troy and Abed's favorite bromance. That's I think that has to be it for me. It really, like, nothing brightened your day on a Thursday than seeing Troy and Abed on Community together. I don't think there's, I mean, what an insane thing for Donald Glover to go from that character to being like a cultural icon and an A-list movie star. But yeah, you can't beat it. You can't beat it. It's so fun.
Yeah, I think the Somewhere Out There scene from An American Tail, where they sing the Barbra Streisand song, is maybe the most powerful bromance moment in sitcom history. But I'm going to go with a different pairing, although I do love yours, Rich. I got to give it up for my 2 main men, Lenny and Carl from The Simpsons.
Yeah!
They work the same job. They hang at the same bar. They are completely inseparable. You can't have Lenny without Carl. You can't have Carl without Lenny.
Everyone
it just
says
wouldn't feel right.
And I am going to have to go with a childhood classic, and that is the 2 first male roommates in TV, Bert and Ernie. Bert and Ernie are a fantastic partnership.
Famous bros.
Because while they do not get along, I think that they stick together nonetheless. Maybe they have a ridiculous lease that they can't get out of, and their building doesn't allow subletting. But I like to think that they stay together because they love each other so much. But as a nice second for me, Jake Peralta and Charles Boyle from Brooklyn Nine-Nine are also a fantastic pairing.
Or Jake Peralta and what's Craig Robinson's character again?
We'll just say
Doug
Craig
Judy.
Judy.
Doug Judy.
Doug Judy.
Yeah, those are both excellent choices. Well, with that being said, Rich, first of all, thank you so much for that question of the week.
I'm so glad I farmed it out.
Let's take a deep dive into Scrubs, and we're going to start off with a quick little synopsis. In the unreal world of Sacred Heart Hospital, intern John J.D. Dorian learns the ways of medicine, friendship, and life. But there's a little bit more that goes into this podcast and this episode and this show, rather than just medicine, friendship, and life. So Max, why don't you tell us what that is?
I am so excited to talk about today's episode, the pilot of Scrubs, My First Day, which aired on NBC on October 2nd, 2001. And I'm so excited to talk about this showrunner in particular. We're going to be discussing a gentleman by the name of Bill Lawrence today. Bill Lawrence, the most famous alum from my high school,
Woo!
Ridgefield High School in Ridgefield, Connecticut.
Ridge
That's
what?
right, go Tigers. Ridgefield. And I need to get personal for a moment here. Being an aspiring comic and sketch performer and writer in high school, falling in love with Scrubs the first time, and being so inspired that someone from my town, from my high school, was this like big wig in TV. That's the kind of thing that gives a 16-year-old a lot of hopes and dreams. It's not in this episode, but I can't think of more TV lines than "Fork, me no can eat soup" that I've just said more in my life from Scrubs. But Bill, I want to talk to you directly for a moment. Because many moons ago, I had 2 auditions for a pilot of yours that didn't make it to series. I'm not saying these things are related. But if we believe in chaos theory, the butterfly effect, more colloquially, had I booked this day player part in this unaired pilot, we might not have Ted Lasso today.
And what a true shame that would be.
And Bill, I know you've got Shrinking on Apple. You've got this killer deal with Warner Brothers right now. It's fantastic overall. I'm so excited for you. Ridgefield boys, we're making it in this world.
They're doing it for themselves.
Bill, if you hear this podcast, if you see this clip on social media, because spoiler alert, I'm putting it on TikTok, I've got the password. If anyone at Doozer sees this, this is my official pitch to you, my challenge to you, Bill Lawrence. Let me be a day player on Shrinking. Let me play a patient on the couch in a scene. Hell, let me play a barista getting one of your leads coffee in a scene.
Can I just be an extra? I would if Max is there, like, just let me tag along. You don't even have to pay me a day rate as an extra.
No,
I'll just be there.
Geoff, that's not how unions work.
Bill Lawrence, let me be Jason Segel. Why won't you let me be Jason Segel?
But listen, you, your team, your CDs, you've heard my voice now. Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. You've seen my face. I could do any part that you need in that show. So please, just give me a day player, right?
It just feels like that old SNL sketch of Adam Sandler as like the boy from the neighborhood, where he just like asks for increasingly creepier things, and Chris Farley screams behind him, "Why won't you let him suck your toes? For the love of God!"
Now that I've made my pitch, let's talk about Bill Lawrence. So Lawrence, after graduating from Ridgefield High School, go Tigers, goes on to William & Mary, where he gets a degree in creative writing. And he's encouraged to try his hand at screenwriting by a family friend, writer Norman Barish, who wrote the Broadway play Send Me No Flowers, which became a film adaptation with Rock Hudson, Doris Day, and Tony Randall in the 1960s. Was also a pretty prolific sitcom writer in the 60s and 70s. So, fresh-faced Bill Lawrence moves to Los Angeles, and he's sending his writing samples, and he is discovered and signed by legendary manager George Shapiro, who is one of the most influential mentors in Hollywood. He discovered and repped Jim Nabors, Buddy Hackett, Andy Kaufman, Jerry Seinfeld, Carl Reiner. He's a legend amongst legends, and now Lawrence is his new mentee. Lawrence gets a job on the short-lived sitcom Billy, which is a spin-off of Head of the Class, before moving on to shows including Boy Meets World, The Nanny. He's a writer in the first season of a little-known sitcom called Friends. And then from Friends goes on to the not quite as successful Champs.
I don't think that's going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So Champs is canceled after 9 episodes, but ends up being really important in Bill Lawrence's career and sitcom history as a whole, because Lawrence, along with Champs' co-creator Gary David Goldberg, go on to develop the sitcom Spin City for ABC. Spin City is going to be a reunion for Goldberg and Michael J. Fox, Goldberg having created Family Ties in the 80s, and the show was a hit, lasting 6 seasons and 145 episodes before ending in 2002. So with Family Ties preparing to come to... with Spin City preparing to come to a close, Lawrence is looking for his next project, and actually goes back to his old college dorm mate for inspiration. His dorm mate was pre-med when they were living together, and beguiles him with stories from his residency years that Lawrence finds incredibly humorous. So his friend, Dr. Jonathan Doris, a.k.a. JD from their days at William & Mary,
Amazing.
becomes the basis for the pilot of Scrubs, and Doris actually serves as a medical advisor for the show, along with 2 other doctors, Doctors John Turk and Dolly Clock. John Turk definitely makes sense in this pilot episode. Dolly Clock, that is a name that more diehard Scrubs fans may recognize from later seasons. So the show was originally produced by ABC Touchstone due to Lawrence's ties with Spin City, but broadcast rights go on to NBC, who picked it up for series order immediately, and that brings us to My First Day.
Yeah.
That's wild. Could you imagine, like, the beauty of that is, based off of all of our relationships, if one of us does indeed write a TV show, inevitably, Kerbis will be in the lore of some TV show that lasts at least an episode. I like to dream that.
What, a character just named Kerbis?
It's just Kerbis.
It's going to be Geoff Kerbis, but with a J.
Yeah, just in spite of me.
Geoff Kerbis.
God damn it.
Can't give him the full name. Well, you guys ready to start our first day of Scrubs?
Boy, I have watched this pilot just from so many rewatches so many times. I could almost do it from memory at this point.
Yeah, this is the official sitcom of late afternoon syndication from like the late aughts, early 10s.
Well, let's start off and let's kick things off with just our cold open. We meet JD, John Dorian, who is getting ready for his first day at Sacred Heart Hospital. And I really like this just very simplistic opening of that anyone can relate to. Of the first day on a job is a very interesting feeling, right? There's that nervousness that comes with it, that you've been working towards this moment, especially after going to school for your entire life so far. But rather than taking it too seriously, we get a montage of Zach Braff using his shaving cream in multiple different ways and being extremely wasteful.
War paints, shaving cream, bikinis, all the classic jokes.
Yeah, it's very much a nice variation on when every guy grows a beard and starts shaving it off. He does different versions of beards or like mustaches that he would like to try, and inevitably ending with one that you can't really do other than Michael Jordan in the early 2000s. You know the one I'm talking about, listener.
Oh, God.
I love a sitcom protagonist setting themselves up with like their first line of dialogue being, "I'm the man." It's such a simple like proclamation, and I think it tells you so much about how JD views himself, this like young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like ready to get out into the world. And I think this is really effective as a cold open for letting you understand the person we're going to be following. Like you get to see their relatability, their likability, and then that hard cut of I don't know Jack when he enters the hospital. I think it's such a great mission statement for what this show is. I think it's such a great portrayal of like early mid-20s life. And I think it really gets you excited for what this show is going to be for the next 20 some odd minutes.
And I think from a writing standpoint too, this script starts off on such a strong note. Like just the first voiceover being, since I was 11 years old, I've been able to sleep through anything, storms, earthquakes. Last night I didn't sleep. I think that is like a absolutely perfect line just to kick everything off. And I mean, from someone who's like in a position to greenlight certain scripts and stuff like that, you read something like that, you're absolutely hooked already.
Yeah,
and for a go ahead, Jeff.
I was gonna say, just like Max, adding on to your point of like the I don't know Jack, like I feel like that set the tone in a world where we have constant medical dramas and like medical shows out there where like we just did Grey's a few weeks ago, right? Like everyone on that show seemed to either be extremely confident in what they were doing or know exactly what they were doing. To have a doctor come in and sort of flip the script of, yeah, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, but like, we'll see, is like, that is, talk about drawing me in immediately on like, oh, JD's different. This show is approaching the concept of medicine in a less mystified manner.
Yeah, and something from like the other side, from like a creative angle, if this pilot was filmed, think probably like spring of 2001, to do a 30-minute network sitcom pilot that is single cam, starts off with VO, and then also in its cold open flips its POV at one point. These are super creative artistic choices that Lawrence and the team took here. When we're in the hospital that very first time, and JD sort of getting like railroaded with information by one of the nurses, we flip the POV and we're looking at the nurse from JD's eyes, and you're getting that feeling of like being overwhelmed, being out of your element for the first time. And I'm gonna hit on this a bunch, but this show, it plays with its camera work in such creative ways. It plays with its narrative storytelling devices in such fun ways. And for a show that aired at this point, you know, these things are commonplace now, but 21 years ago, this was not the norm. And Scrubs takes big swings in its pilot episode off the bat, which I love.
Yeah, I don't want to stall too much just on the first like 30 seconds of the show because there's just so much that happens. And like, let's just talk quickly about that intro, right? The Superman, the montage, the quick cuts of every single character we're going to see who's involved in the life or your experience as a patient, and just seeing I'm no Superman, very much trying to establish, and at least in my mind, more clearly, like, hey, the doctors are not these supernatural beings, right? Like, they are human beings, and this is going to be that realistic look at them. Just a note, when I was growing up in Florida, I had a couple of close friends who were doctors, and I always asked them, like, what's the show that, like, really represents life as a doctor as closely as possible? And they always talked about Scrubs so lovingly and my favorite was, this was around when Grey's Anatomy was at its peak. They were like, if my hospital was anything like Grey's, I would have quit 20 years ago.
Yep.
Because I can't do that. But Scrubs is very much realistic, and we start getting that idea really right after the intro as a whole, when we start having this use of flashbacks of what orientation as a doctor is in comparison to a normal 9 to 5 as a whole.
I couldn't help but think about like this orientation compared to the Grey's Anatomy orientation. And like the Grey's one, it's like, it's so intense, it's so in your face, it feels menacing. And with this one, we get the HR lawyer played by Sam Lloyd kicking things off with the line, the hospital doesn't want to get sued, being sued is not a good thing. And later on letting us know that if a patient is dead, you can tell them anything. And I think it just like, it subverts what we expect from medical shows, because at this point we had things like St. Elsewhere and ER that were like the medical dramas, and Scrubs just like, it flips that on its head. And it, like, I don't know, Sam Lloyd, R.I.P., is such a fun part of this entire series, and his intro is hilarious for a character who's not a lead. And Scrubs never wastes an opportunity for a character on screen. Even if you're on it for a moment,
Yep.
you're not wasted. You have specifics, you have meaning behind what you say. Another thing I'll probably go back to a few times this, but like there's not a single throwaway character or throwaway line in this pilot, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this scene, I think, like, just, we are going to have a lot of flashbacks as a device for JD on this show, for a storytelling device. We're also going to have, and I think this is something that was great, is just like, even the writing for that scene of like, yes, it was orientation, but we get to meet Turk and get to understand this relationship by Zach Braff, who is probably the whitest man in 2001, talking about how he is down with rap music. And like that, just that quick, like, little bit in that exchange tells us everything we need to know about their friendship. Do we get to learn more about how JD and Turk met in college, went to medical school together, both chose the hospital because of they both got accepted for the residency program? Yes, but we already get a feeling of like, oh, wow, this is like really good relationship. Like, two guys being best friends immediately, and I was fully bought in on it.
JD should have known better than to ask that, though.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe not first day of work at a new job after
In front of the lawyer?
after very many years of medical school. But I guess this is 2001, so I don't know. Maybe rap is still like a novelty for white people at this point.
But we do sort of use this flashback as a way of introducing a few characters, right? We talked about Ted, who is the counsel for the hospital. We meet the chief of medicine, Bob Kelso, played by Ken Jenkins. Mm-hmm. And then we go into sort of this idea of, we start to get this idea of cliques within the hospital, or that hospital is no different than high school in certain circumstances. While the surgery residents are going out to a bar, we see all the medical residents playing Pac-Man, I believe was the game. Sounds like a really fun hospital. I
wonder which high school Bill Lawrence based that line on.
Oh, who can say?
Wait, Max, was there a Pac-Man machine in your just like cafeteria at Ridgefield?
Oh God, I wish.
Max would have been a broke child.
No, we just had someone like illegally download a Mario Kart emulator onto all the computers on the network.
God.
Hell yeah, dude.
I have not heard someone talk about an emulator in years. But we get our first, we get to meet JD. JD gets to meet our love interest of the show, or the presumed love interest based off of how this episode goes, of Elliot. And we have our first just like fantasy cutscene that we were not like going into the show. I don't know if you were prepared for it, but we just get it. And even I watched this with my partner Alex when they were doing this like marathon finish line, and JD just throws coffee in his face. She was just like, "What the fuck is he doing?" Because the show does not give you any hints of we're going to be in this world where this guy's imagination is wild, but like, I really loved it of just like, yeah, sometimes we have these intrusive thoughts, and this is what it looks like in the real world.
The fantasy montages are so important to the comedy of the show, because you really do get an absurdist comedy that still does not wreck the real world at all. And I think that's super important to to differentiating the imagination of JD and like understanding his sense of humor, while appreciating the severity of the gravity of things that are happening in this hospital. I think it's such a crucial part to why this series works so well as a whole.
And it creates that balance in JD. If you're dealing with this drama and at times trauma in your everyday life, you need to have these little escapes. Yep. And so for JD to have his imagination be like a tool to calm him, to ground him, to give him perspective, I think it's really important. I do really quickly need to mention maybe the, worst 2001 line of this so far, which is him describing Elliot's butt as looking like two Pringles hugging. Look, I don't think butts were in vogue at this point. What do we think of this?
This is years after Sir Mix-a-Lot.
I'm trying to figure out which way are the Pringles hugging curve to curve? Are they hanging? I need a draw up of how we think the Pringles are hugging.
TV Pilots License at
Pringles.
Instagram.
If you have
please
a
submit a drawing of two Pringles hugging to simulate an ass.
And if they are anthropomorphic Pringles, even better. I just need
Pringles,
that
if you could send
framed.
us, if you could Venmo us $2.99 so we can go buy a can of Pringles and check this out.
Pringles, I know you're listening. Friend of the pod.
Yeah, Max, if we don't have a Pringle hugging TikTok, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Once you pop, the fun don't stop. Back to you, Jeff.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you. But I think one of the things that was really clever about this fantasy sequence is the show does such a good job of bringing us back to reality with very quick single lines of not everyone is in JD's world and in his imagination, because as soon as they're finished, and as soon as they're done racing, right, we see Elliot say something to the extent of, you do a bunch of cardio, right? Or like, big fan of cardio. And we're immediately right back in to the world that we've been given. As we continue, though, we start to get even a better picture of what life is like. We get this small idea of, in Grey's Anatomy, and I'm going to be referencing Grey's a lot, the chief resident, or the resident that is overseeing these two interns, is a gigantic star of the show, right? Like, that is someone who we come to love and we come to respect. And in this show, they literally just make fun of Dr. Jeffries incessantly and being like, I'm a dork, I'm a dork, I'm a dork, I'm a dick, I'm a dick, I'm a dick. Yeah. And it was just great. Like, here's a non-important character, but as an intern, if we did not show you this person, you'd be like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, I think what makes this show so impressive, and what I think really makes what I really think the big draw is to actual doctors, like the people who feel this is the closest media interpretation of what their day-to-day life is that it is absurd. You get to see every person for their flaws immediately. It's not, blurry cuts, someone saving a life immediately on their first day. What it really is a brand new doctor being afraid to draw blood or insert an IV and stuff like that. It's really humbling for a lot of people. It makes everyone look like they're just trying their best. Especially for Carla and the rest of the nurses, it takes into consideration the massive pay discrepancy. And we talked a bit about this during the Grey's episode, about how little the nurses are actually seen as real characters on Grey's, and a lot of them are pretty interchangeable and kind of don't even have like a real foothold in they don't even have character arcs of their own. This, you're gonna see both Laverne and Carla be massive parts of this show, and there's just so much in this that is human, and everyone is extremely fallible in the show. Everyone has a great but very dark sense of humor, and I think that really connects a lot of this to the real world.
It's like, and yes, this was not on the air nearly as long as Grey's Anatomy has been, but like, this approach of showing all sides of the hospital is so great, right? Like, this first episode, day one, really gives us that idea of like, here is everyone that you see in a hospital. And like, let's just continue, right? Because we start to meet these mentor figures that will be in JD's life, right? We meet Carla, who instantly nicknames JD Bambi. We think we get an explanation, but I don't think we really need one, right? He is a fawn.
He's Bambi.
Yes, he is Bambi, but he's also he's a newborn in this crazy world that is this hospital. But then we also meet Dr. Cox, who is played by John C. McGinley, and
true icon.
I'm absolutely in love with this character immediately on the screen. It is witty dialogue immediately. It is not fluff. It is not your traditional, oh, I am the manager of people. It is, I am here to do my job and get my job done and get the fuck out of here. Yeah. Very much.
He is definitely the epitome of someone who is like so good at their job, but is so not interested in moving up in it. Like really just does not have the drive behind him to do anything but get in and out. But he's so insanely competent. And you can tell as the episode goes on, you can tell he does want a mentor, or a mentee, even though he is like completely trashing all of the interns immediately. And interns or residents? It's interns.
It's
right?
interns. It's interns.
Okay. Yeah, that is definitely like how he comes off. It is very jaded. You can tell immediately how much he hates Dr. Kelso, because you can see like that the rest of the hospital just kind of keeps him down. And yeah, I mean, I feel like Dr. Cox is absolutely the person you would want at your bedside above anyone else in the show, just because he's so insanely competent that he can kind of make this place his home.
He's competent, he cares, we come to learn that he cares, mm-hmm. right? But he's not going to show it right away. And he cares in very particular circumstances, right?
And it's such a...
Well, what I was going to say is he doesn't call JD by his name at first, right? This was something that was super clever that was used throughout the episode, but he starts giving JD all of these nicknames, like calling him Nancy, which, not really cool with that, but it's all good. Like calling him all these other things, but rather than just saying JD or Dr. Dorian in these instances.
I just love that we get supporting characters who get full arcs in this pilot 100%. As well. And Cox has one of the more interesting ones to me, which we'll touch on as we progress through this episode. But I like that you get a character who is something of a foil to JD physically. He is the opposite of John Dorian, the way his demeanor is, the way he lays down the law, his physicality compared to just the way Zach Braff inhabits his body in this. And what we learned here too from his interaction with Cox is that JD is like the epitome of the book smart but like not street smart kind of doctor. Like he relies on people to do his nitty gritty, even though he knows all of the book answers. It's just like such a good scene of showing like he's like a student of the game, but he hasn't like learned the game yet.
Yeah, it's that's like one of the issues that comes up, right? Is we start to see sort of life for JD in the hospital. Interns go on rounds, right, with our chief of medicine, Kelso. JD is brilliant. He's giving answers to Elliot because he has a crush on her, but he's afraid to actually do procedures as a whole, and he's having the nurses do them, which people are like, hey, and we see Dr. Cox be like, hey, if they find out you're doing that, you're going to be out of here real quick. Like, we start to get these hints of, like, I know what you're doing. I am going to give you advice, but it is not going to feel like it's not going to be lovey-dovey or, like, coddling. It's just going to be stark reality of the situation.
The most important advice that Dr. Cox gives JD, though, is if you push her out a stiff, no one will ask you to do anything.
Which I think is so goddamn funny, and I wonder if this is, like, a real thing that happens at hospitals. I mean, I feel like a lot of this is kind of, like, based on real stories, as we mentioned, like, from Bill Lawrence's old college dorm mate. And I want this to be true so badly.
But before that even happens, we get to see another one of these fantasy situations because JD sits down to watch TV really quickly. And we see this fantasy sitcom on the TV of him and Elliot that was just truly just like wonderful. It was great. It was like this nice little refreshing bite of like chaoticness that just was fantastic.
Also,
as a whole.
Did Bill Lawrence get creative credit for How I Met Your Mother? Because he deserves it. He accidentally invented How I Met Your Mother.
That's amazing.
Something in that scene, though, that also has nothing to do with the pilot itself, but we were watching it, and when the flashback of him and Elliot in their multicam sitcom life pops up, my wife exclaims, "That's the My Wife and Kids house."
It is, yeah. That is definitely a sitcom house.
She instantly pinged that they were using that ABC set to get that shot.
So I wanted to share something with you two gentlemen that makes me love John C. McGinley even more. And it is him in this wonderful Indiana University. They filmed a movie in Bloomington that he starred in. So he lived in Bloomington, I think, for like 3 months. Just
Hell
like
yeah,
very,
The Good Catholic with Danny Glover.
Yeah, just like very under
Why do you
the
know
radar.
that?
Yeah. So, but I love that photo. I have pulled that photo up for non-podcasting reasons, just because John C. McGinley is the man. But after day
real
one,
March Madness spectacular.
It is April when you're listening to this. It is March when we are recording. Sorry to
Cool.
Yeah.
It's March for about 12 more hours.
It's March for us, April for you. Let's do this.
We promise that we will finish this before April.
But we go on to day 2, and in day 2, we meet a character that if you're just watching this pilot might seem very secondary or very trivial, but we meet just a character by the name of Janitor. That's it. And Janitor is played by Neil Flynn. And I think that the Janitor character is just so great of showing us, like, there is life in a hospital of people who aren't doctors or aren't nurses. And you are interrupting their day and their job by existing as well.
I love starting off day 2 with this almost non sequitur scene, because like you're probably coming back from commercial break at this point. It's day 2, and after all of like the drama of day 1, we kind of like we reset, and it's like a really fun sort of second act. You get this little gag scene with this menacing threat. It's like everyone's always threatening JD. Side note, Neil Flynn actually like went all the way to producers for Dr. Perry Cox.
That's wild.
Before they
very different character.
They told him, "Listen, we've got a guy in mind, but we want you to just read this part." And Neil Flynn took Janitor for 1 day of shooting. And he thought it's a day of shooting, and I'll do this part in this pilot. It's a day of work, and it ended up becoming one of the biggest roles in this series. Once again, fork, me no can eat soup.
Also, and I know this is a pilot podcast. I know it's a pilot podcast. For the people listening who do want to watch more of this show, they have one of my favorite universe-splitting, fourth-wall-breaking moments.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Flynn,
yes, I know what you're talking about.
Because the Janitor is just playing Neil Flynn, who has a very throwaway line in The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, and has one of my... They have the Janitor still be that person inside the Scrubs universe, which is so fucking mind-blowing. It's very like Julia Roberts is Julia Roberts in Ocean's 12 kind of thing. Yeah. It's like it's so stupid, but Neil Flynn, you'll recognize, is the CTA employee or police officer who yells, "Kimball!" I hope that didn't just break everyone's ears. but in The Fugitive, and I just like it's something I think about just like spur of the moment sitting on the couch. I'm like, why did they do that? There's no reason for them to do that in Scrubs.
Let's just talk about some of the things that end up happening, right? During this whole episode, JD's trying to find a roommate. He assumes Turk is going to be his roommate. But there's a little bit of friction based off of just these clicks, right? And there's even more separation of Turk and JD, this friendship, this base for him, in the idea that Turk is potentially going to be sleeping or having sexual relations with Carla, this nurse that we've met.
Which don't fuck your coworkers on the first day.
Well,
please.
But also like good for Carla.
Rich, it's day 2 at this point. There was a little chyron on the screen that let us know.
You're totally right.
Good for Carla for being like, Turk, why don't you take off your clothes? And then her just being like nice and then leaving was one fantastic. But then Donald Faison coming out just with the pillow over his junk was just like A plus stuff. I loved it so much.
I'm gonna say something really dumb here, but whenever I watch older sitcoms, I forget that the like actors and the characters they're playing are like oftentimes meant to be like in their early to mid 20s. I assume because I'm watching things in retrospect, everyone's much older than they are. The characters are all like older than me. I know it's a dumb thing to say. I still refuse to believe that anyone in Friends is supposed to be in their early to mid 20s when that show started. No, that was in the 90s. They're all in their 50s. But the conflict of a best friend who you've known for like a decade telling you they want to branch out is such a real thing that I think everyone goes through at that phase in life, where it's someone that you've come of age with and is your best friend that you've gone through thick and thin with, and suddenly you're detouring. I think that's a relatable moment to every single person who watches this show. And even if you don't know lick about medicine, you have been in that position before. And I think Scrubs is a really good job of balancing like life and career and setting up conflicts for its protagonist in both of those lanes here. And for all of the goofy, for all of the cutscenes and fantasies, it hits at emotional cores really well. And this isn't as deep as this show will get in its run. Hell, it's not even as deep as it's going to get emotionally in this episode. But I think it's a lane that people don't touch on. I love storylines about friendship. I think we talk a ton about romance. I don't think we talk a ton about friendship, and I love seeing it in mainstream media.
Yeah, it was something that, you know, touches of like the idea. Max, I love how much you said that, because like, yes, all three of us have been friends for going on almost 15 years, which is gross. I need new friends.
How the hell old am I?
But it's one of those things where sometimes friendships do stray based off of things like work and based off of just life as a whole. And they do such a they do such a good job.
God damn it! God damn it! What a great point, Max.
They do such a great job of making sure that this show is not just all about the laughs, right? We are seeing a full human being in John Dorian, and we also like striking on the concept of, I want to move us towards like the idea of emotions and these people being 360 figures, right? Not just side characters in certain instances. We have our first like real confrontation of the show between Elliot and Carla in a moment of slut shaming that also reveals a lot about Carla as a character.
Truly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a great thing. Like, I forgot about this scene, but it also just like, it shows you like, holy shit. Like, first of all, Judy Reyes can fucking act. She's so goddamn talented, but like her revealing like these emotional things of like the concept of you need someone when you are working in a hospital like I am. You need someone when you have a sick parent. And then you also just need to feel good about yourself sometimes. And that was just, if you can't relate to that, you might be, you know, soulless in my opinion.
And this confrontation stems from Elliot Reed making a good point to start. It begins with office place sexism, her being called out as a nurse. You know, we talked about this with Grays. The nurses are viewed as these lesser figures. They get dumped on by the doctor. She makes a big point to call out, this is my stethoscope. This is my chart. I am a doctor. And it's like, she then just like twists the wrist a little too far with Carla and immediately gets called out on her privilege, her position, her BS. And I love, love, love Carla's ending line to this argument. You can dump on everyone if you want, but you will never hurt me.
Yeah. It was... There's just so many sides to this show, right? Of like, there's the comedy, there's opportunities for each of these actors to just go at it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes it so impressive, right? Is you do not know what you are getting into every week when you watch the show. Your emotions are going to be toyed with in many different facets.
Yeah.
And that basic... Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I'm sorry. And this confrontation, too, doesn't, unfortunately, break the Bechdel test because it is still about Carla and Turk, really. But it does cement Carla as a top-of-the-line character, that this is not going to be... nothing to this point says, hey, Carla's really going to be a main figure in this until this particular moment. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what this exact moment puts Carla and Laverne both in the top of the line here. Like, it is really, I think it's so crucial to how this series progresses and just how the episode progresses too, of just like, all right, we're going to demand respect from these nurses. They are going to be characters. They are going to have their own stories. Episodes are going to revolve around both of them. They are not just magical assistants that who are going to step into frame, save the day, and then step out of frame for the doctors like to use as narrative pieces.
What I was going to say is this pilot is such like a traditional like 3-act structure, and act 2 basically ends with this like Carla Elliot feud, but it is like, it's the conflict act. It's, our hero is faced with adversity. It's, JD shown as a literal deer in headlights being run over by a truck. It's Turk wanting to break away and explore new facets of their friendship in adulthood. It's JD fleeing a call, like an emergency call, to go hide in a literal closet. Elliot being faced with her privilege when she's just trying to make a name for herself in her field. And then we get just such a delightful Chiron to begin Act 3, which is that night, 30 seconds before going on call.
Yeah. And we are introduced to the idea of being on call, the realities of the situation, right? You are unsupervised in many cases. You are not sure what you are going to face. And I really did love the hospital montage of the experience of being on call, right? You are
the slow-mo.
The slow-mo, everything going on around you. You struggling to find time to sleep, trying to do all these different things, seeing the repeated reminder of you are a failure to JD by not being able to do simple procedures was something that was just powerful. But then we get this really, like, this beautiful moment, and I say beautiful because it's written so well. During this entire episode, we see JD working with one patient in particular, Mr. Bursky. And Mr. Bursky's being basically, he's a guy in a wheelchair. We don't know exactly what's wrong with him. But we know that he's in the hospital, so he must not be feeling the best. And while JD is checking on other patients and trying to help, Mr. Bursky crashes and he's not able to help. And we deal with JD's first death. And he says this line, "I'll never forget that moment, the way he looked exactly the same, but still somehow completely different." That was just holy shit. Like, because you instantly go back to death in your own sense and seeing maybe that first time that you have a relative pass away or something, and it struck.
When I talked about like characters not having throwaway lines or moments, Mr. Bursky is a really good example of that, because the first time we see him, JD's wheeling him in the elevator. He makes a fart joke about making sure that his gas isn't contagious to others. And then he tells Mr. Bursky that there's like something on his scan that concerned him, and he wouldn't be able to sleep that night if he didn't do like a check or run a test on him. And Bursky says, "I'll do it for you." And we see the knowledge side of JD. We see the bedside manner. We see all of that care and attentiveness. And that last line from Bursky, like, "Okay, I'll do it for you," and it feels like it's nothing. It feels like a routine check. And the next time we see that character, for him to have passed, I think that it's like it has to be the guy that JD bonded with that he loses. It has to be the guy that he connected with over like fart humor in the elevator with. It can't be. I mean, it could be, a medical emergency. We could see the hustle and bustle, and Geoff, you mentioned like, the whirring and quick cuts of like 90s TV medical dramas. But instead, it's, it's the calm, placated character from Act 2.
Yeah, and we actually do. I think this moment is pretty standard in a lot of pilot episodes of hospital or medical dramas in general. You get someone who is seemingly fine on their first day, and you have the main protagonist deal with someone crashing who you weren't expecting. You get to have them experience the moment of life's fragility in a hospital, and have them deal with death when, JD was already coming close to death a little bit with some other patients and things like that, and got to see how the rest of the hospital, saves them, and like the role of everybody else around him, including his future mentor. We do get this in Grey's too, of a seemingly fine patient who is going to be out of that character's life almost immediately and unexpectedly, in the same sense where I can't remember the character's name now from Grey's, but it is you have it was someone that that one of the doctors promised was going to be okay, and that was the lesson learned. It's like, you don't promise that someone's going to be fine. Because look how easy
TR
it's
Knight
taken
as
away.
George again. It's the George thing again.
Thank you. So that is really what that is what the scene reminded me of, and I think it's so important that in the reality of it establishes the gravity, and then you see almost immediately his escape from these like dark intrusive thoughts, in the Bible for Scrubs, Bill Lawrence writes very callously, body count 1, Mr. Borsky, which is like a really, really dark, but in the same sense, like, that's unfortunately the dark humor you have to use to get by seeing the horrifying things as a doctor. And if you don't have that, then what the hell are you going to do? What the hell are you going to do to make sure that you feel okay the next working day?
Yeah, and one of the smart choices that he made after this scene is, when you are at your lowest, it is the people who surround you who allow you to keep on going, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that in a couple of ways, right? First, we see that JD and Turk, I don't want to even say they reunite, but they get back together. Turk admits that he's terrified as well. In only a way that Donald Faison can, in the idea of like the terrified underneath the mask, which great line. He's amazing physical actor.
The screaming face.
Yeah, the screaming face.
Everyone do it for the YouTube.
But then we have this idea of showing the people who are really making sure that JD's okay. We have Carla and Dr. Cox appear again. There is a patient who is crashing. JD is the first one to answer the beeper. And Dr. Cox, and there's a reason I mentioned that he doesn't call JD by his name ever, chooses to call JD by his name, get him to save this patient and actually get over his fear of being physical with the patients, not just being an academic, but being a doer. And it is this amazing moment of seeing Dr. Cox in this brand new light of he is here to be a teacher. He genuinely cares about the patients and the people he is working with. And Carla is just there right with him to make sure that everything is okay. And it really, holy shit, what a way to like make this change and make this turn.
Yeah, if JD losing that patient, having to call time of death is his like all is lost moment, we get that like ending arc of the hero's journey here. And I think Cox just telling JD he's your patient now is more powerful than any flowery line of dialogue. It's direct, it's to the point, and it conveys so much, and it really completes Cox's pilot arc so well. And I think it's a really nice contrast to the way we complete the Dr. Kelso arc in this chunk as well, with really like breaking his veneer to JD, the guy that he thought was, you know, the hero, the old guard that he would look up to, is like a penny pincher who wants to kick people out of the hospital and onto the street if they don't have private insurance. And so it's sort of, this misdirection, but it's like everyone's arc's coming full circle here. Although this hospital has nothing on Seattle Gray because JD completes his shift after 31 hours. I'd like to see him go 17 more hours to get to a full 48 like we saw Gray's fucking anatomy.
31 hours and 12 minutes he is on the clock.
That's really funny.
And we end
the
show with a narration by JD. And what's funnier than a man walking into a clear door? I challenge you, because that is the last we see.
Literally nothing.
And
okay. There is one moment here that I think is extremely important for the show in general, and it's a very, very quick physical moment where Dr. Cox is about to go pat JD on the back, which honestly would have been a butterfly effect change on the entire show. And his choice to not pat him on the back and instead like be upset at himself for like even thinking about doing it is so indicative of how he's going to be a reluctant mentor, a distant mentor for JD as it goes on. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there as well, because that is like a crucial part of it, and I thought was really good acting.
So that is the end of this pilot. Are there any things that we loved that we did not discuss?
I love bookended dialogue to start and end a pilot, with the line, "I'm the man," being one of the first things we hear from JD in his opening voiceover, and the last VO we hear when he crashes into a glass door. I think it's a really fun tool for pilot script. Just a couple of camera work things we didn't get to mention. When JD is trying to escape his first emergency paging, we see the hallway kind of like tilt and move a little bit. There's almost like it's not like a shaky cam, but it's not like a tight framing. It's a really cool trick there. The slow-mo that we mentioned, that first night of On Call. And there's just a lot of like really close up and angled framing here too. It's just so different than other single cam shows, definitely from other multicam shows. It's filmed in such a unique way, and I can't think of another show that we've done of this time frame that utilizes its camera quite in the same way Scrubs does.
Yeah, and what I will say as far as things that I loved, we talked a little bit about this being a realistic medical show. I loved the idea of treating this as doctors have bad days too. Doctors have bad parts of their jobs. They're not just heroes every single time. Patients are lost. Even patients who seem that they should survive are lost. And that's just sometimes adding true reality to the situation makes a show that much more redeemable for me. And also, we didn't even talk about it. This show is so fast paced. This show has so many witty jokes going on all the time. And like that kept me in it really, really well. It was a tight 24 minutes, I think, of a pilot. But I was in every single second and I was engaged every single second. Rich, what about you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think we left too much on the table, really, that we didn't talk about. I think all three of us are so passionately fans of this show that we wanted to just keep talking about exactly what we loved in each single moment. But great job, Bill Lawrence. We are definitely going to tweet this at him later. Ad nauseum.
Any wait a minute moments for y'all?
That's a great question. I don't think so. It seems really tight.
I think with any comedy that has generational gaps. There's a joke or two that you maybe roll your eyes at a little bit looking back on it with 2023 goggles, but that's just the way comedy works. I think more hits than doesn't hit 23 years later in this show, so nothing really on my end.
My one thing, and I'm going to be, this is just me being, we've talked a lot about music, right? And this show, we're going to talk a lot more about it because I have a very special relationship with like some of the music in this show. I think it is so well done. And Colin Hayes specifically has so many thank you notes he has to write to Bill Lawrence. But there is, I forget what the song was, but at the beginning of the show, before JD's hit with the stark reality of what it's like being an intern at a hospital, they start this one song. They never finished it, and I was like, what the fuck? I was getting in the groove of the song, too.
Are you thinking of Please Forgive Me by David Gray?
It might have been that, and
Okay.
I was just like, I was so upset, like, for maybe 20 seconds, which is way too long to be upset about that. But, I this is just, it's such a good pilot. What I will say is, as the only person in Scrubs on this podcast, I feel like I have the authority to prescribe us a daddy of the week, and that is Dr. Cox. Dr. Cox is 100% the daddy of the week on this. You cannot convince me wrong that I am wrong. He is the mentor of our dreams, and I think he just is fantastic. We do have an in-flight question, though. Our in-flight question came to us before the show, and it is, what is the best mentor-mentee relationship in TV history? So
go ahead if you want to kick us off.
I will kick us off. So I could very easily say that like Coach Taylor in Friday Night Lights has a mentor relationship to every single character on Friday Night Lights, and that would be easy. But the one that sort of stuck out to me is like I'm gonna go back to Brooklyn Nine-Nine with Detective Jake Peralta and Captain Raymond Holt. If you watch, the beauty of that relationship in the mentor-mentee is from episode 1 until the very final episode. It's just this beautiful, like, building father-son-esque relationship that just builds every single season. Mm-hmm. And, like, yeah, it gives me the warm and fuzzies. I could choose Scrubs very easily, right? But I wanted to give a little bit of grace and a little bit of room to this pilot. Mm-hmm. Rich, what about you?
I love that. So I chose one that I think is not ideal. I think it goes through a lot of ups and downs. I think it gets very toxic at times, but I think it's crucially important to a women's role in the workplace kind of thing. And I'm choosing Don Draper and Peggy from Mad Men.
Great choice.
I think that encompasses a pretty dramatic mentor-mentee relationship, and it's extremely imperfect. There's a lot of times where you just want Peggy to go out on her own, and it takes a long time for her to do so. But she becomes such a crucial part of the show because of the very small lift of Don Draper realizing her copywriting potential and becoming part of the creative team at Sterling Cooper. And yeah, I just think that is like through all those seasons, they do a terrific job of like growing and tearing apart their relationship.
Max, what about you?
When we talk about ensemble comedies, you have to figure out how you make each different piece connect. It's not just how does your protagonist relate to people, it's how do your side characters relate to each side character too. How do you build those moments where they have B and C plots together? And a character who I think does such a great job of this is Parks and Rec's Ron Swanson, played by Nick Offerman.
What a good choice.
At some point, every single character in that ensemble has a mentor-mentee relationship with Ron. There is a moment where he gives some advice, or he goes to bat for them, or he stands up for them, or protects them.
Or he learns from them.
Yeah, or he learns from them. There's a give and take with that character. And the reason why Ron can like get away with all of the, all the jokes in that show is that because he's also so good at his job, and I don't even mean in government, I mean like as a leader. And so I think that that's a really great portrayal of mentor-mentee relationships. I think that's a show that, much like Scrubs, does such a great job of its like interpersonal connections. So shout out to Nick Offerman.
Well,
Right.
thank
Killer.
you so much for that in-flight question. We'll talk a little bit more about what episode we are doing next week, so you can submit those questions a little bit
please.
early. But let's talk a little bit about the history of the show, because it's wild. It has some twists and turns. So this show had 9 seasons and 182 episodes. Seasons 1 through 7 were on NBC. But then, after season 7, NBC decided they wanted to go in a different direction with comedy on the network. So season 8 through 9 were on ABC. There was also a web series called Scrubs Interns. We're not going to talk about that.
Let's not.
But seasons 1 through 3, just to give you all an idea, had some amazing ratings. 11.2 million, 15.9 million, and 10.4 million. They were respectively ranked number 38, number 14, and number 43 as far as all TV shows. After that, it fell off a cliff and was hovering around 4 and 3 million at any point in time. A lot of this had to do with what else was on at those times. And NBC, during the 2000s, comedy was on Thursdays. For, like, forever, comedy was on Thursdays.
Yep.
And they just sort of were like, let's not move Scrubs to Thursdays. Let's make it our powerhouse of Tuesdays. So they would show, during season 4, reruns of Will and Grace, reruns of Scrubs before showing the new Scrubs episode. And then surrounding it, Amazing Race, which was sit-down television in 2004, and House were surrounding it on other networks. So it was really in a very tough situation. And those 2 shows alone pulled in, I did the math on this, 50% of all TV viewership at the 9 o'clock hour, which is bonkers. So the show is technically a part of the Bill Lawrence universe. And why I say that is because there is a cameo from one of these characters in Scrubs in an episode of Cougar Town, and then you see the rest of the cast of Scrubs in Cougar Town. So Sacred Heart Hospital is in Cougar Town, in the same universe as Cougar Town, and I like to think so is the cast of Shrinking somewhere out there.
Well, that's in Pasadena, but yes.
But
Which you can catch me on next season.
yes. I'm just in the room.
Imagine this worked.
Yeah, it's called Manifestation.
So I wanted to do a quick thing to shout out Colin Hay, who, if you don't know who that is, he was the lead singer from Men at Work.
I can't get to sleep.
Yeah, and that, so he appeared on 7 different episodes of this show.
Talk about a man at work.
Yeah, there was a very famous scene with him singing Overkill, acoustic, and that song, spoiler alert, is on my Spotify.
I can't get to sleep.
That version.
He never did once Man Down Under, which
Yeah. He does have an acoustic version of it, I will say. Let's talk about awards. It's awards time, baby. 86 nominations and 15 wins. They got 17 Emmy nominations and 2 wins for those. A win for multi-camera picture editing and sound mixing. Also, Zach Braff.
Creative Arts Emmys matter.
Wait, multi-camera?
Yeah.
These are not primetime wins, Rich.
Yeah.
Wait,
No.
but it's not a multicam.
Rich, I didn't write the awards. Why are you upset with me?
They brought one camera.
Yeah.
You know, like how at the Oscars, like an actor will try and like campaign in a category that they have a better chance at winning it. It's one of those
Like
situations.
Beyonce winning EDM album of the year or whatever.
Yeah. But here's an interesting fact, though. Zach Braff actually got all of the Golden Globe nominations for the show. He did not win any, but he was nominated, I believe, consecutively for 3 years to win a Golden Globe for comedy.
I should have just given him one. That man's been terrorizing us ever since.
Leave Florence Pugh alone.
Oh my god. So as far as where you can find the show, you can find it on DVD as well as on Hulu.
Thanks for leading with DVD.
You're so welcome.
Here's where you can find it on VHS.
Hey, DVDs are picking up, y'all. People love physical mediums now.
Oh boy.
But that is the history of this show. Rich, it is time for your game of the week.
Yeah, let's do it. It's just one quick question for you guys, and the title of the game of the week is "I Am Superman?" Question mark. There is from the core 6 characters. Let's say Zach Braff, Donald Faison, Sarah Chalk, John C. McGinley, and Ken Jenkins, and Judy Reyes. Of that core 6, one of these people has been in a Superman property. And I would love to hear who you think it is. And you can reason it out if you want, or you can just yell out an answer.
So who were the 6 that you said? So it was Zach Braff.
So
Donald...
JD, Turk, Elliot Reed, Perry Cox, Bob Kelso, and Nurse Carla.
I'm going to say it was Sarah Chalk. I
feel like this is not going to be like a DC Pictures thing. I know John C. McGinley has a lot of voiceover work, so I'm gonna say John C. McGinley.
I think you guys both made really good, like voiceover guests for this. It is John C. McGinley. He was in He was in a Batman versus Superman animated series.
Yes, he was, and I forgot about it, and I'm very upset right now.
How it was from like 14 years ago. How do you? Why are you upset about not knowing?
I have way too much time to know these things.
Man,
there's so much.
Are you at a Karama level of TV consumption?
We don't want to talk about it.
His brain is
Shout
just
out to
all
Karama.
the good Catholic with Danny Glover and John C. McGinley.
Well, Rich, thank you for that question of the week. I don't even want to know what this... If someone's keeping score, please don't. I'm really upset.
And I've got a question of the week in Scrubs fandom. Is this infected?
Well, I have...
Tune into YouTube to find out if Max is infected.
We are coming towards a land here. I have 2 more questions for each of you. Do you think this show could be made today? And would you continue watching this version of the show? As
in, would I continue for a 9th time of watching every single episode of this, except for when the show turns into the Dave Franco and Courtney Cox years? Yes, I would keep watching. And would it be made today? Hell yeah! I want to see humble and not superhero doctors on this. I want to see goofy comedy. I think one of the reasons that the show was not on NBC's Thursday comedy thing is that it is mostly a drama with some light humor sparkled in. And I think this is one of the first shows to actually make me cry with some of the dramatic moments. Also, fuck you for using the Fray so well in this show. The Fray is made for people dying in hospitals. I'm sorry. That's number 1 rule of the pod. Use the Fray when someone's dying in a hospital.
I don't think I know that band. That went over my head.
God damn it.
Oh, motherfucker. All right. Max, what about... Or wait, Rich, do you think this show could be remade? Do you think it could be made today?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we're missing anything about this. I think obviously the I don't think the JD and Turk duo is necessarily as like hip and cool as it might have been in 2001, or progressive or anything like that. But I think absolutely, yeah, it could still be made today. Everyone has to be pretty young though.
All right, Max.
Yeah, 100%. I would keep watching it. I have gone through this entire show before. I would do it again. Rewatching it just reminded me how much I love it. And if you're not familiar with it, go and check out at least these early seasons. Could it be made today? I would agree, absolutely. I know the knock from a lot of people about Scrubs has to do with some of its humor being dated. This show does get flagged for some misogynistic humor and having a little bit of like a boys club rep with its jokes. But Bill Lawrence and his team is, working straight through to this day and making some of the top stuff on TV. I think that a version of Scrubs with different jokes would be just as effective. It is a 30-minute sitcom that plays with genre and did musical episodes, did multicam episodes, did flashback episodes, did dream sequences, flipped its entire first-person VO for entire episodes. It's so creative with how it tells stories, and I think that there is absolutely a place for that on TV somewhere today.
And I will say 100% a version of this show should be made today, right? There's so much garbage that is on TV. There's so much garbage that I watch on TV. I would love to replace it every week with 20 minutes of Scrubs. With that being said, as far as rewatching this, 100% easy. It's I couldn't have given an easier yes to this show. This show is so wonderful. And there's a reason why a lot of these actors who star in the show are still finding a lot of great work these days, because they are all so talented, and Bill Lawrence really did it, right? He made a fantastic show. With our plane coming to a land, but before our plane comes to a land, wanted to give everyone... We're on our initial descent, but I wanted to give a preview of what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this, you can give your in-flight question. Next week, we're going to be throwing out the first pitch of the baseball season with Eastbound and Down, and you can find it on HBO Max. And
for now.
So if you are interested in shooting us a question, feel free to on our Instagram, on TikTok, email, leave us a voicemail. We can't wait to hear. Yeah. Even if you just want to tell us who your favorite first pitch throw came from. Cool. I can't wait to hear your answer.
It's 50 Cent. It's always going to be 50 Cent.
No, if it's not Megan Thee Stallion, I'm going to be upset. Because if you've seen the video of her doing it, she asked the cameraman, who am I supposed to throw it to, as the catcher is behind her. And
I love
it is the greatest video ever. A+ to her. But we're really excited to be filming that, and look forward to that in wherever you listen or watch us. But as our plane is now at a land after our initial descent, where can we find you two gentlemen?
You can find me on season 2 of Apple TV's hit Shrinking, written and produced by Bill Lawrence. You can find me on all things social media at Maxwell Sing. You can find original sketch comedy from myself and Rich Inman over on TikTok at Dadwagon Comedy, along with this podcast now on TikTok at at TV Pilots License. You can find me on IMDb if you search Max Singer.
Wow.
Rich, what about you?
You can find me on episode 2 of Scrubs, just watching it. I'm not going to be on it. At Damn That's Rich on Instagram.
You can find me being a cheer mom on the set of Shrinking to Max, cheering him on silently. Somehow convincing Bill Lawrence to let me walk behind him. And you can also find me on social media at RunJeffRun on Instagram and Twitter. You can find the TV Pilots License on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, which is Eastbound and Down, remember it, write it down, and watch it on HBO Max. You can email us at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com, DM us on Instagram, or call us at 213-290-1713. Make sure to watch out for Instagram for sneak peeks of our upcoming episodes with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off. We look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then, remember, we're no Superman, and put Max on Shrinking.
Put Max on Shrinking. Eva Netanyahu.